Right, so I'm just waiting, and while episode 2 of this week's Fun Facts with Liam, I feel it sound like I'm flogging a dead horse the way I talk sometimes. Um, I'm just waiting. I'm thinking too much. Maybe it's a sign I should try and nap or something. But yeah, while I'm also waiting for to warm to cook some sausages, I'm gonna treat myself to a sausage sarnie before bed, and Irish sausages, which to honour some possible distant but not so distant cousin ancestors of mine, and to insult any proud blighters, fellow blighters, whatever. So far, I found that Irish sausages are probably the best so far. I mean, I might be being a contrarian here, but or insulting people, but essentially, Irish sausages are probably this, a tradition, or traditionally similar to British sausages, similar as like, I mean, which kind of stands to reason. There's bubble and squeak, which is potato and which is cut potato and onion and so on and so forth, and the Irish do a similar thing, which is it's not Cocannon. That's some kind of like Gaelic fruit bready pudding thing, which sounds really nice. Cranachan, that's it. I think it's Cranachan. So, and I don't like bubble and squeak either, so I won't try that either. But yeah, let's get to the subject of the episode. Speaking of food, and I didn't really know this until I looked it up. But fillet of fish, it's been around since about 5 years after the McDonald's opened in the US. I don't think Ray Kroc opened his store, his chain in Cincinnati, or took the idea. I think it was based off like an original diner experience idea. The original McDonald's in the 50s. About 5 years after 1954, another businessman observed that in Cincinnati he opened his own McDonald's branch, and observed that local Catholics didn't eat beef, or just meat in general. I think it was beef on Sundays. So to have them coming in as regular customers, he came up with the idea of fillet of fish, which became, basically had proper lift off, as it were, commercially 3 years later in 1962. And that's basically it. So yeah, I'll be uploading this and putting the references and blah de blah in there, and get to uploading the fourth and final episode. And it's going to be quite unusual, but it's relevant to the theme I have going this week with the Friday stuff. So yeah, it's going to be an absolute belter, as Del Boy, I think, once said. Hey up. So yeah, it's that day of the week, Friday for Fun Facts with Liam every Friday. And I was looking for things, well, to start with, initially, looking for things that occurred on the 23rd of January. But I think I'm gonna do a explicitly food-themed set of episodes. And the reason for that is, basically, until today, I didn't even know there was an international sticky toffee pudding day, and that's today. And Like I said, I didn't know that was a thing until today, which is a shame because I'm game. The best sticky toffee pudding I ever had was in a pub called the Wheat Sheaf, somewhere between. It was either, I forget, somewhere between Leeds, Wakefield, Selby, Hemsworth, kind of where my mum's relatives lived up, and it was probably the best damn dessert I ever had, even as a faddy kid. I mean, I would love just to recreate that experience one day. A nice mug of tea with it, or mug of coffee. Maybe that's sacrilege. Maybe you need tea and some full fat cream with it. But anyway, yeah. So this is about, and I was reading about sticky toffee pudding, the history of it as a whole, and there's like conflicting, I suppose, rivalry between who it was invented by, where was it invented, and also when. Now, the tradition goes the earliest sticky toffee pudding was supposed to be invented by the landlady of an inn in Yorkshire. Can't remember it right now offhand, but you know me. I'll put the I think it was a Gall Inn, Gal, basically GALL, in 1907, but also Cumbria lay claim to it, and Scotland do as well. The Scottish, depending on who you ask, would claim that they invented the, I suppose, modern version of the dessert, because the Scottish version of the dessert was apparently invented around 1967, where there's a couple of restaurant owners or pub owners, fast food couple, did their own version in Cumbria, in like the Lake District or Peak District. I forget which. I get mixed up between that neck of the woods. The picturesque kind of valley bit of England and into not really Scotland, but it gets kind of close. I'll stop waffling on, but they did their own. The couple in Cumbria did their own version of the sticky toffee pudding, the takeaway version actually, which they first came up with in 1984 and became popular around that region of GB about 5 years later. So even though the original sticky toffee pudding was invented in 1907 in a pub in Yorkshire, there's still sort of like a little rivalry thing, where there's like, who came up with it first, who's is better, that sort of thing. Kind of like, joke time. British problems of things, British things maybe, where the fish and chips kind of rivalry thing. It's like, oh, North is better, no, South is better, and it's either a bias thing, or it's a preference thing, or it's to do with whatever process of whatever recipe and process you're familiar with that you grow up with. I probably would say that northern fish and chips are the best. I prefer the ones from the seaside, but the ones in like just town areas, industrial town areas, whatever, are pretty decent too. For example, so yeah, the sticky toffee, it was a good day to tangentially talk about a thing related to a day celebrating a probably quite underrated food, actually. Yeah, I think sticky toffee pudding on the world stage is rather underrated. So I didn't know there was an international day, sticky toffee pudding day, and much less did I know that there was a sort of a rivalry thing. Again, it's one of those national, regional pride things, I guess, to an extent, sort of like like I said, fish and chips, and also curry as well. You know, people tell you, you know, again, Scots will vehemently defend, like, oh, it's modern, you know, after a pint curry is a Scottish thing, where there's people in Birmingham will tell you the same thing because it's to do with apparently the oldest. For example, this is like a sub fact in there. The oldest proper Balti house to basically create the proper, proud to be British kind of curry. I suppose was some Balti house in in Birmingham. So yeah, leave off with that. Yeah, so I'll stop waffling on and get to uploading this, and see you in the next ones. Right. So for this episode, seeing as I'm doing a food themed thing, as you might already know, those of you who've already seen or will see the first episode of this week's Fun Facts with Liam, it's food themed. I've not already said that. Sometimes I lose myself in my explanations a little bit, which backtrack into a expanded explanation and blah blah blah. Yeah, I thought, I was trying to think of ideas and certain like attitudes and attitudes towards certain foods and status and where it all connects. And I was looking through a list, and I think a couple of basically I'm going to talk about two pretty much quite posh foods that have been posh since relatively modern, recent-ish times. And what I mean is by recent-ish, both cucumber sandwiches and lobster-based dishes around the similar time in Victorian times and maybe a bit before were seen as a rich person's food. Like, for example, if you've watched Boardwalk Empire, like I have, if you're a fan of any, I went on a bit of a HBO kind of binge for a bit. I watched Sopranos, bit of The Walking Dead. Never watched The Wire, not really, but I watched Boardwalk Empire before I got into The Sopranos, and a lot of the corrupt politicians in high society peoples, they really loved their lobster thermidor. That was like a really, really popular dish from probably 1880s to 1920s and a bit beyond that. But lobster, and I'll put the and I'll put this as like a reference in the description. When I was reading one of my favourite books, one of my go-to reads, Anne Rooney's 1001 Disgusting Facts, lobster was seen as like a proper desperate, readily available, I guess, trawlerman's food, and it goes all the way back to when fishermen in Maine in the 1600s they'd basically lobster were commonplace in Maine, so that's what they'd have. It's sort of like how the Irish in the 1840s, were reliant on potatoes. It was easy to grow, and what was readily available for the general working man populace. But over time, over 200-ish years, lobster became part of different dishes. Like I said, lobster thermidor in late Victorian times and early 20s. For example, for high society, like I mentioned in Boardwalk Empire, you see, Steve Buscemi and Dabney Coleman in tucking into a nice lobster thermidor. I've always wanted to try it, but there's also actually quite fitting and relevant to this episode. As far as the thumbnail, I was searching for a specific thumbnail and see if there was a specific dish that combined cucumber sandwiches and lobster, and there's two. There's a spring roll sandwich type thing, and there's an Italian similar bite-sized sandwich called a lobster trazzini. Probably completely butchering that pronunciation, as I generally say, but both are basically lobster and cucumber sandwiches. Now, I'm not fussed on cucumber sandwiches. I mean, everyone on my dad's side of the family loves cucumber sandwiches, but I'm not asked. I think I'm a bit boring, but I probably would really enjoy a lobster and cucumber sandwich. Probably go quite well. You got the coolness of the cucumber and the leftover simmering steaminess of the lobster, but also probably a bit of a cool aftertaste because it's it's seafood. That's what shellfish is like. So I probably would enjoy that. So yeah, two foods, two dishes, if you will, to an extent. Yeah, they became dishes. One became more of a dish than the other. Cucumber sandwiches were like a basic staple for anyone who had leftover bread and leftover cucumbers. Going back to the days where we didn't have fridges. So, and salt and butter was quite expensive, so people just had to basically use what was in the cupboards, and that's how cucumber sandwiches came to be. For example, for your average poor working man, and they became popular in Victorian times. Tea and cucumber sandwiches. They might have actually had cucumber sandwiches in. I think they're quite popular with Americans too, or they were similar traditions. In maybe 12 Years a Slave, I seem to remember. It was a bit where Sarah Paulson and all the other snobs did the Victorian tea lady thing, and I think they had cucumber sandwiches and tea, but also macaroons. Like they really wanted to give the impression they were high society, but her and Epps, Michael Fassbender really weren't. They were just scum who were rich. So that's the story of two surprisingly related dishes that were for peasants that became fancy posh foods. Heidi ho, ha ha ha. Yeah, that was my good guy impression from Child's Play. I mean, I kind of been binge watching Chucky, Child's Play stuff recently. Probably my favourite 80s slasher villain so far now, currently. Behind Freddy Krueger. But anyway, let's get to it. How do? As I said, Heidi Ho, similar thing. So yeah, this is the penultimate episode of this week's Fun Facts of Liam. And yeah, food based, blah blah blah. I'm sure you all know the drill now. Well, the gist of this week by now. Those of you that have seen it, by the time you do see it, and blah blah blah. Time is relative and individual. Well, not individual, but who knows. But anyway, so seeing this has been kind of wintry and kind of just post Christmas, I've been, and partly why I've done this kind of the theme of this week's episodes with food. It was like a test of willpower to not binge eat things and spend money and shit. It's not that I'm poor, it's just that I'm trying to be just good in general. More is more, basically, in the words of Ben and Jerry's. And speaking of beloved American meals and snack foods, this one is about chicken nuggets. And they actually started out as just like how, I guess, comparatively over at this side of the pond, Spam was a beloved breakfast, lunch food, brunch food as well, I guess. You can combine the two. 11's kind of food over here for ages. It was imported from basically from tinned good canned good stuff from like American GIs, and that became a popular tinned product for Britons during rationing days, but also the Americans were going through it as well, of course. And chicken nuggets, chicken was seen as the kind of affordable staple for people who wanted meat, still wanted to eat meat. So, but by the time rationing was wearing on for several years, people were getting kind of fed up of just having chicken on its own. So a professor named Robert C. Baker came up with the idea of chicken nuggets, and he tried all sorts of like recipes, putting bread with it, which is how he come up with like just fried chicken in general. I think basically the love of the American love of fried chicken, and of course eventually internationally the love of fried chicken in general, is thanks to Robert C. Baker's idea of making a cheap side staple food less grueling to eat, basically, because people rationing went on from 1945 to all the way to, I think, as late as, depending where you lived, and I don't think there was that much difference in years. I think it went all the way to kind of to 1953 at least, a little least. It might have been like 1954 when it officially stopped. At least in my neck of the woods, at least over my side of the pond. But I don't know. It's probably very similar in the States. But chicken nuggets were born from wanting for basically an idea to make ration based food more fun to eat, as it were. So then eventually that became fast food in diners, KFC, McDonald's, by extension, chicken McNuggets, of course. So yeah, I suppose this is sort of little tangentially similar, that means vaguely related, to my previous episode where I talked about how attitudes to certain foods go. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the penultimate episode of this week's Fun Facts with Liam. And I'll get to uploading this, and I do hope you'll check all of them out, of course. There's always that 1 or 2 or 15 loyal viewers, so cheers for that. Cheers for all my subscribers, 100 so far. For some reason, it keeps dropping on and off. I keep getting 101, and then I keep getting 100. I don't know why. But anyway, that's for another whinge for another day. If it is a whinge. Maybe it's something I just pointed out. So anyway, I'll get to uploading this, and as Sergeant James Bird from Spyro says, cheerio! Hello there, and welcome to, of course, the fourth and final episode of this week's Fun Facts with Liam. And I think I decided to sort of break the mould a little bit with this. I mean, it's food. I suppose you could count drinks in there as food and drink. But yeah, I'm just going to include it in the same playlist as well. For example, you'll eventually come across that. I might include it sometime in the... Yeah, I'll include it in the description. So, I decided to, break the mould and look at drinks. Mainly cocktails, why they have, like, weird names and so on and so forth. And I decided to focus on the Harvey Wallbanger. And I thought, is it really as dirty as it sounds? Turns out it really isn't. I always thought the Wallbanger thing came from people downing a few too many of the Harvey Wallbangers, of the mix that would become the Harvey Wallbanger, that was said to be more or less invented in the 1950s and became more and more popular as a cocktail over a period of 10 to 20 years in the 60s and 70s. And this comes from the reason why it's called the Harvey Wallbanger is the Harvey thing. And I thought maybe Harvey Wallbanger is just his full name. I mean, it's like a vaguely Jewish, to me it's like a vaguely Jewish American kind of sounding name, Harvey Wallbanger. But it turns out it comes from him downing a few too many of the future namesake cocktail. And basically, Tom Harvey, the guy in question, was a champion surfer in the 50s, but he really couldn't take his grog. In the words of the Orcs, basically, the Orc captain, Lord of the Rings nerds will know what I'm on about, basically. But yeah, he downed a few too many of the yet to be named Harvey Wallbangers, which were originally derived from another cocktail called a screwdriver. And he that was his favourite drink at a hotel that he used to frequent. And he would just be completely blotter. That's, Northern Blighty for just absolutely pissed drunk. Trousered is another favourite of mine. Like how, let's not go into another tangentially related tangent. Let's not do it this time. Make this longer than it needs to be. But, the Wallbanger thing comes from the fact that, or the popular rumour, which it probably is a fact, like an urban myth. I think urban myths are more likely to be real than actual myths, but who knows? Anyway, I like to believe that I subscribe to the popular conjecture, and I'm not drunk, I'm just trying to basically do this, without, this is what happens when I go off on a bit of an autistic tangent. I mean, yeah, I am 1/8 Jewish somewhere, so maybe that explains a lot. Joke. That was a joke. That was a fucking joke. Kidder. A lot of Jews in Liverpool and Lancashire and the Yorkshire borders and so on and so forth. A little historical joke there. As well as obviously London, which is the where they kind of started Stepney Jews and all that kind of stuff, and then kind of moved further north and so on and so forth, and blah blah blah. Historical spurg over with, on top of another historical spurg that is the factoid of this episode, which is the back to the Harvey Wallbanger thing, and the Wallbanger thing comes from that Tom Harvey was really angry at himself for losing, for getting absolutely pissed drunk, and not performing, not in that way as I originally thought it would be, like, banging against the wall, getting jiggy with it, as Will Smith used to say in the 90s. But it's to do with, apparently, it was him basically throwing a rage quit after a terrible day of having a hangover and losing at surfing. So yeah, that was Tom Harvey and the creation of the Harvey Wallbanger. And, remember to like, subscribe, comment, and so on and so forth. And, again, thanking my current subscribers. You're all champions. So, yeah, that was it. That's it for Friday's Fun Facts with Liam. And I hope to see you soon. Whatever that means. Harvey Wallbanger! Harvey Wallbanger!